Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley within Massachusetts. I'm your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Coleman. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Mass. Currently, the communities that he has selected to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight on local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the Elm Street in Holyoke, Massachusetts. So, in general, what is Elm Street like?
Elm Street is one of the greatest streets of Holyoke. It's right about in the middle of the ones going from east to west. It's a north to south travel. At present, it's only one way, and that direction is south. And if you travel along thus from the north to the south, what do you see? Well, you start off of Lyman Street. It used to be such that you can go right into Pulaski Park behind you, but that's not true anymore. And as you travel along, there's a lot of great things along the way, including right away you're going to meet the St. Jerome's campus with its convent and chapel right alongside you. And at the height, that was a great campus with a lot of activity around it. And then as you travel up further, you're going to pass right by the side of the latest Holyoke Post Office from 1935, this one. This is the fourth headquarters of the Central Post Office of Holyoke. It's a large Art Deco building. Then as you go along, you would have at one point met Moses Newton's house. That's gone. A bowling alley had come into place there. But the next block beyond, between Appleton and Essex, you have on the right-hand side the Chapin Mansion, and then on the left-hand side you would have, for instance, the Dwight House, and also you would have Joseph Skinner's house. And then beyond that, you would have kept passing by the Newton House, for instance, and beyond that you would have seen the convent of the Perpetual Help Church.
And tell us about the Chapin Mansion.
Okay, so I mentioned that Chapin Mansion, and that's a beautiful neo-Tudor house. At one time, Clement Herschel lived there, and he was the head engineer for the dam and the canal system, and he's the one that was responsible for making the masonry dam, whereas there used to be a wooden dam there. And also there, of course, the Chapin family lived, and the Chapin family was a family that got the park system of Holyoke going. So to me, that's great because I love the parks of Holyoke. Now, also near the Chapin Mansion, something's going to happen soon, so we'll talk about that here. And we'll also talk about how Elm Street compares to these other streets in this greatest section especially. But the Chapin Mansion has gone through a lot in this lifetime. And what it is now, it's a place for veterans to live. So if you're a veteran, you get reduced rental space within that large Chapin Mansion. Now, Arthur Chapin was one of the best mayors in history of Holyoke. Nathan Avery, who succeeded him, also was excellent. So Holyoke for 12 years had excellent mayors from 1894 to 1906. And they got the process going also of getting the Olmsted brothers into Holyoke. And the Olmsted brothers had 25 different projects within Holyoke. And so they really helped define what Holyoke looked like, including some of the projects were Pulaski Park, Springdale Park, Jones Point Park, and one that's not there, Elmwood Park. So they had a lot of influence upon the history of Holyoke itself.
And real quick, before we continue with our interview, just to fill our listeners in, to find out more information, or if you're interested in signing up for various tours, check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find all of his videos and podcasts of the stops along each tour, and as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun educational outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what is going to happen to Elm Street soon?
All right, the block from Appleton Street up to Essex Street, and then actually all around that entire block, but especially there on Elm Street, will have phase number 2 of a housing project. Now, phase number 1 of this project, called Wayfinders, happened at the corner where the Holyoke Public Library is, and they fixed up the Randolph, the Carlson, put a new building in, and also joined that to the Providence School of Nursing on Elm Street. Now, phase 2 is going to fill in all the empty spaces around there, so all of Elm Street between Appleton and Essex, which is now empty, and then that portion that's on Appleton Street, right at the same block, will have phase 2 of a project where new housing is built. It'll be smaller 2-floor housing. It won't be the massive projects of phase 1, but it's up for renewal, and that's great because that empty block always attracts trouble, and they've been taking care of the block to make sure it's up to stuff.
And how does Elm Street compare to other streets in Holyoke?
Okay, Elm Street, in comparison to the rest of the grid of streets, it's way different from, of course, Maple and High Street and Chestnut Street, which were always retail or institutions. And finally, you get one street that's mostly residential with a few institutions. So this is the start of really heavy residential in the Gritter Street area. They wouldn't have known ahead of time what's going to go where when he made these Gritter Streets, but this was the first. And from there, Elm Street, Walnut, Pine, Linden, so forth, are all heavily residential with a few institutions, whereas the big three, Chestnut, Maple, and High, were very heavily institutions, retail, and a little bit residential. So yes, there's an incredible difference, and very obviously, when you walk around or drive around that area, something different is going on. And of course, the institutions and businesses are going to be close to the mills, close to Holyoke City Hall, and after a while, you do expect residential. And Elm Street is the first heavily residential of the grid.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And we want to thank our sponsors as well. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley in Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities that he focuses on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight on local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. So in today's episode, we will be discussing Walnut Street, located in Holyoke, Massachusetts. So in general, what is Walnut Street like?
Well, compared to other grid streets, it's starting to be very, very residential. Only a few institutions are along it, but that's good because you got to start with the home at some point. And Walnut is very heavily residential compared to Chestnut, Maple, and High Street, and even compared to Elm Street, which is right there, it's even more so. So today we're going to talk about many of those unique houses around there, and the one institution that's important, and then how it compares to all these other streets and what's been happening. But if you walk this street, it's a one-way street, and that's fine. But if you drive along it, it's one way, so you have to go a certain direction, and we'll try to cover in that direction as we go along. And when I do my webpage on it, I'll cover it, of course, from south to north, because that's the way a car would go. And there's lots of nice buildings along it, so make sure you stop and look at them. And at the very end, it would have reached into the Pulaski Park.
And tell us about the Walnut Street row houses.
All right, the Walnut Street row houses are now part of what's called the Essex Street Historic District. This is National Register Historic District, and it's the 14th one total entry in the National Register of Holyoke, and I believe it's the 6th district overall. And it deserves it. That district starts at the public library. It goes from east towards the west, and it's now added many mansions, the Newton Mansion, for instance, the new Wayfinders complex, and then it reaches upwards to the Prentice House, which is absolutely gorgeous, the Helen Loverin House on the left-hand side, and includes a little bit down these side streets, which includes the row houses. Now, these row houses were built in 1871, 1 year after the Holyoke Water Power Company said that any mill no longer needs to build worker houses. At that point, a lot of tenement houses, apartment houses, homes, and row houses went up all of a sudden because private contractors knew that people would still need homes and the mills were still coming to town. And from that point, Holyoke started developing more of a personality of these separate houses, where before that there wasn't too many at all.
And quickly, before we continue with our interview, to fill our listeners in, if you want to sign up for any of his various tours or to find out more information, check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can also find videos and podcasts of the stops along each tour, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, @yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun and educational outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, tell us about the Second Baptist Church.
This is the second home for the Second Baptist Church. It started out in the late 1850s at one of the corners where the Richardsonian train station is. It was near the Holyoke Water Power Company, or now modern Holyoke Gas and Electric. And by 1886, they had moved up to Walnut Street, facing onto Appleton Street. And they made a very large building there for their church. Inside, of course, you have the main section for the congregation to have their mass, but also in the back, there's Sunday school area, and that's large because a lot of these Protestant children went to public schools and didn't have religious education. So they would get theirs on Sunday afternoon, listen to either the minister or helpers, and they would listen to Bible studies and so forth. And so it was very interesting. It's a big, large church in this block. Now, sadly, in the last 12 years or so, it's starting to have chunks of it come off the building. I think a couple of chunks, one from the upper back steeple and then one from the front. And Holyoke actually forced them to close down the front of it because of the dangers that it might have inside of it. It's still there, they still want to use it, but they have to get the money to fix it up, and that's going to be a lot of money. So it's a gorgeous church, and sadly it has this problem.
And how does Walnut Street compare to other streets in Holyoke?
Okay, compared to the other streets on the gridded pattern, it's starting to get into very heavily residential. From this Baptist church towards the north, it's almost entirely residential. There is one section where Holyoke Gas and Electric has their gas division, but after that it's just homes and homes, and you used to go right into Pulaski Park. If you travel back from that Baptist church, then you come to the row houses, but then you come to many more Victorian homes all in a row, and thus you would have seen Victorian home after Victorian home if you could have come out there 100 years ago. The only thing that was different about that pattern was that you could have seen parts of the Perpetual Hope Church, at least its back portion. So this Walnut Street is similar, but it's mostly similar to the other streets around closest to it, such as Pine, such as Elm Street, which are heavily residential in some institutions. It's nothing like Chestnut Street, High Street, and Maple Street, which are almost all institutions along this length.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And thank you to our sponsors. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I'm your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. And his tours spotlight on the canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. So in today's episode, we'll be discussing Pine Street in the community of Holyoke, Massachusetts. So, in general, what is Pine Street like?
Pine Street is one of the greatest streets of Holyoke, near in the downtown section. And it compares well to the other street, but it becomes very residential at that point. And so if you travel along Pine Street, which is the one way that travels from north to south, you'll see a lot of residential blocks. But there are a couple of really cool things along the way. Wisteria's has its official front door point to Bryant Street, and also the Holyoke High School campus, the second version of 3, was along here, and that was 2 city blocks in total. And then there's some nice looking houses. Of course, the Victorian homes are common, but there's also simpler homes than that. All right, so in general, it's a likable street. It's a street that has some empty spaces now because of a few buildings have been taken down, but it compares well to other streets around Holyoke, especially with the greatest streets. If you like to be away from institutions and business, this is a real good street to live on. And you can also learn a lot about it through going on a tour of it, because you get to see the certain homes are really nice Victorian ones. And then you go to a very ordinary set, and that ordinary set was probably made by Orrin Allen at some point. And then you get the special buildings like Wisteria's.
And so tell us about Wisteria's.
All right, in 1874, William Skinner moved with his family from Williamsburg to Holyoke, took up a whole city block, which is given to him for free, and he put his house from that community into Holyoke piece by piece. Each piece of wood was numbered and put together again. So this home that's an 1840 home is now in the middle of places where all the other houses might be 1880 or 1890. So it's kind of out of the ordinary. But it's a nice, beautiful home. It's a Second Empire style. It has a beautiful garden to its south side, and it's all well taken care of. Any problem they've been getting is Community Preservation Act grants lately to help fix that problem, including for electricity, for paint, for any wood that had rotted away. And lately they're trying to fix up the wall that's collapsed around, especially along this Pine Street side. And that would take a lot of work, put a new drainage system in, put no soil in, so it drains better.
And real quick, before we continue with our interview, just to fill our listeners in, to find out more information, or if you're interested in signing up for any of his various tours, check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of some of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, tell us about the Holyoke High School campus.
The second of three Holyoke high schools was fronted along Pine Street and had three structures to go with it. The nicest one, the biggest one of all, was high school itself, which was made in 1896. It was 3 floors high. Sadly, 1968, it burned and they had to take it down. Next to it, across the street, was the high school gymnasium. And then on that same city block, there was also the vocational technical school. So I had three buildings in a row that were very nice to look at. And too bad they're all gone now. But the other buildings have filled in. For instance, a senior center is there, a bank is there, a CVS is there. So it's been filled in. But you wish there were nice public buildings that you can go to every day, like a school there. And there was a very grandiose architecture behind it.
And how does Pine Street compare to other streets in Holyoke?
Well, compared to the other grid streets, it's probably quite different from High Street, Maple Street, and Chestnut Street, which are a lot of institutions, churches, so forth. And this really doesn't have that. But it has a residential street. It's very nice to travel along because you have a lot of Victorian homes, some of them very ordinary. One very out of the ordinary place is across the street from Wisteria's. You have homes that are very simple or are brick facade to them. One of those homes actually was the chauffeur that drove the Skinner family around. So it's a very unique street. Now, compared to other streets that aren't in the gridded pattern, I would say Pine Street is very gorgeous compared to those. Because most of the homes are 1880s, 1890s, and so compared to a modern home, this is a really gorgeous place to travel along. And I like to walk down the street. I take my bicycle down the street just to get a sense of what it looks like. It's not my favorite. Chestnut Street is my favorite, but Pine Street is probably my second favorite because you got a nice quiet feel and you used to have some nice institutions. Thank you.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics